Hello, dear listeners. Today we are super happy to have with us Pierre Morgon. So the first question, Pierre, is what's your company about? What are you doing? And for how long have you been a business owner?
Ah, well, it depends on which company you're talking about because I have um, fingers in many pies.
All
To,
right.
but if you're talking about my own consulting company was established in 2015, but it's of course a service and consulting company. But otherwise, I have co-founded a um, a pharmaceutical company in Switzerland in 2021, which is focusing on the development of a first product, a lead product, on the prevention and treatment of a, a consequence, a complication, if you will, of cancer chemotherapy
Okay.
or radiotherapy. And I have another option. I recently, this year, co-founded a company in Italy focused on chronic cough in patients with IPF, which stands for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So we
Okay.
can pick the company you want.
Well, it's as you want. So it was interesting to understand uh, how much involved you are in creating companies and managing these. I guess the questions that are following will apply to whatever company you
All right,
want.
all right.
So I would say the first question is, what's, from your perspective, up to now, your biggest success, your biggest triumph as a business owner, a co-founder, whatever?
I guess the honestly the biggest success was to um, uh, overcome my own hesitation and transition out of established companies
Okay.
and actually try the entrepreneurial approach myself. that because there's an element of comfort when you're in the cozy environment of big pharma, big biotech, where you have a good compensation package, a company car, stock options, and uh, if you're happy to navigate the corporate governance and the endless meetings and stuff, you know, life goes on, right?
Right.
It's and some people are perfectly happy in this environment. It's just that I maybe there's always a positive and a negative side to everything, as you would imagine. I guess I was tempted to do it myself after helping and being at the helm of companies, startup companies that I did not establish myself,
Mhm.
and also after having had my first board director experiences, where you're essentially a little bit, like a combination of the mentor, the coach, the advisor of founders. So there's a point in time. I guess it's a bit like the difference between being a parent and an obstetrician. You want to have the baby, your own baby, at some point in time, and this is, probably what drove me to give it a try.
Okay. And what was the biggest hurdle to come over to do that first step?
Well, I guess the biggest hurdle is to find a good idea.
Okay.
Uh, because it's not just establishing a company because you wake up one morning because you've seen the light, right? It's really not that simple. There's inevitably an element of analysis. It's about a kind of early due diligence or pressure testing of the idea. Um, uh, is it really a good idea? What's the competitive landscape? Uh, a priori, is it doable from the technical, financial, regulatory perspective? What would be the development pathway? Essentially, you could call this the fundamentals of the business case,
Right.
right? That you do essentially for yourself. Um, because even if you're not approaching professional investors, sorry, the at first, and you're essentially resting on your own money and possibly that of friends and family and close relations, you still have to be able to explain what you're after in an articulate manner, and therefore that, I would say, backbone of the business plan is needed. Um, so that's I wouldn't call this a hurdle. I call this almost like a preamble, if you will. It's a prerequisite. And then, once the decision is made and the first analysis is passing the smell test, you're on track.
And would you agree that I know who said that the first thing that happens to your plan is that you throw it out of the window because nothing happens as you plan.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess now that the plans are virtual, you don't throw your laptop out of the window.
Yeah.
but it's true that the plans are going through stages of maturity. It's a little bit, like wine, right? The first juice that you get out of the grapes is not wine, right? It takes a bit of care and nurturing and fermentation to get to what you want, and at times it takes a bit of aging in casks and stuff. I think the metaphor would apply to business plans for startup companies. They go through maturation stages for a combination of reasons. I mean, of course, as you become more familiar with your own idea, you sort of take a step back from the original thoughts, and then you start putting things in perspective, and then you start tuning the
Uh-huh.
plan, and then of course you get external advice. It's pretty much the same story when you're raising money and you're approaching professional investors. The pitch evolves as you're getting feedback from the investors. That's inevitable. It starts from the nature and the orientation of the questions that they're asking.
So based on that, would you say that the first investors you're going to see are those that you don't want their money from? Because that will help you to create a pitch that finally works when you meet the right one.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit a standard piece of advice that you give to startup founders. Don't go to your tier one investors. Go to those that you don't necessarily want on board, in order to get some first feedback. But I would add a little bit of nuance to this advice.
Okay.
What you want is an articulate feedback. Because if you get a
Yeah.
feedback, is a one-liner that says thanks but no thanks, you cannot leverage that, right? There's
No.
there's there's
No.
there's no it's not implementable. And you can't draw any meaningful insights from this. So you want to also at times to go see people if you have if you know some people in this world, because people will do you the favor of giving a detailed feedback.
Okay.
And then once you get that articulate feedback, then you start tuning the story. So it is not necessarily going to systematically your tier two or tier three investors. It is going to people, irrespective of the tier, that will give you an articulate feedback, and possibly will go as far as orienting you to other investors because they know each other in this community.
Yeah.
For instance, if you're approaching an investor and your venture is completely out of their investment thesis, they will tell you, look, this is completely outside of our scope, but go talk to Peter, Paul, or Mary, and that's actually what you want, because then it saves you time.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. So now let's go to the more painful parts of this chat. What were your biggest failures and what have you learned?
Huh. Well, I guess it depends on the company. But I think if you take a step back and without naming any company in particular, and by the way, in this respect, I'm also commenting on the basis of what happened in ventures where I'm a board director. I'm
Mhm.
sitting currently in 10 boards, and I've had over the past 15 years, I've been sitting in at the board of close to 20 companies of various stages, and all of them in human life science. So um, I think the biggest failures, of course, at times are independent from the people. They're linked to science, right? Either
Okay.
either the science is not right, or the experimental model is not right. And essentially, what you get is you get negative results, or you get unconclusive results, which is equally damning, especially in the current fundraising context. Um, and that probably is the biggest hurdle. The second big hurdle that you can meet is when there's a big disconnect between what you think you can deliver or what you think is the right path to market, and then you consult with the regulatory authorities. And when the feedback that you have through the scientific advice or type B, type C meeting with the FDA is um, so far from what you're expecting that all of a sudden you have to completely revise your strategy
Okay.
and for the financing. Um, uh, I wouldn't call this a failure. I call this it's more addressing an unexpected gap.
Okay.
If you, um, it could be regarded as a failure insofar as some may actually think that you failed to anticipate the problem, but usually, you're doing the preparation as best as you possibly can, and then you precisely consult with the authorities to make sure that you're on the right path, and you don't want to hear at the end of the development that you've been missing something important. So now you do it early. Decades ago it was not possible to consult with the authorities that way. It
Okay.
now is possible. So I think it would be I would categorize this more as a hurdle, or as something which is unexpected and that
Mm.
drives you to revisit the plan and the financing requirement more so than a failure. Now, another type of this time it could be a failure, and a big one is what I would categorize as a casting mistake,
Okay.
meaning you think you have the right technology. Okay, you think you have the good understanding of the market, and you get the wrong people.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I like to use the following, metaphor. Investors are a little bit like scouts. Are in a big parking lot, and they're looking for the nice sports cars. Okay, and let's say you find, one of those flashy. I'm not going to give any brands, but
Mm.
red or your orange shiny sports car. You're not going to give the keys to a monkey or to a 5-year-old, because you're never going to get out of the parking lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You need a good pilot, and then you need a good crew for the journey, and it's oftentimes difficult to either find the right people as the company evolves, because like a child, a company has as the company grows, it has different needs, and those needs are not only financial, they're also in terms of human resources, different skills, and casting mistakes can be very expensive.
Hmm.
So um, uh, when you hire the wrong CEO, of course, the wrong CFO, or the wrong chief scientific officer, um, and the impact is a bit less when you have the wrong board directors. But if you have the wrong advisors, especially in a scientific advisory board, you could also pay the price for that. So I would say that, yeah, big mistakes can happen on this broad chapter of, say, human resourcing.
So, but I mean, you obviously you learn that you've made some casting mistakes, as you say, but how do you correct that? Because I mean, that's at the human level, and and
Uh-huh.
and and humans are so complex to read. Or one can play one piece of music and then completely change instrument when he's inside.
That's a good question, Thomas. But again, when we're using a medical analogy, in order to avoid a disease, you try to do a bit of prevention, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so it's by selecting the right people, monitoring the way people perform, having a consensus both on the technical skills but also on the behavioral aspects of the people. And then if the problem materializes, you're left with two solutions: therapy and surgery.
Mhm. Yeah.
Therapy, it can be corrected. Surgery is amputation.
Yeah. Obviously.
I mean, I mean, it's a bit brutal, but I've been involved in my sort of career as a director uh, on three instances in decisions that led to the removal of the CEO.
Okay.
Those are very difficult decisions, but typically you want to act before it is too late, and especially before the shareholders start telling you that you've not been doing your job as a director. So it's it's fair to do everything possible to try to amend a situation when a problem is identified, but there's a point in time where procrastinating backfires.
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice would you give to people who have to hire people right now, who are in the process of maybe have never hired anyone, or had some trouble doing so, or did casting mistakes like happened with you? So what advice would they give them to at least get as close as 90% of success in hiring someone?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, based on my experience as a manager in getting big pharma and big biotech, and also in smaller companies, um, it starts by having a clear idea of what you need.
Yeah.
It's I mean, similarly to what you would do when you want to run a clinical trial, when you want to outsource the process development or the preparation of the CMC part of your regulatory dossier. You prepare a request for proposals and you approach professional companies that would make an offer, a proposal to you. Um, and you do have very competent search firms out there. Um, I know, especially in startup companies, there's a tendency to look for the obvious. What's next door? Who do we know? And it's not necessarily a good idea. It's because you're left with a very short list,
Uh-huh.
and oftentimes you sort of make do with what you know, as opposed to broadening the scope of the research and then increasing the odds of landing the right candidate. So I think for the first advice would be, do not go for the obvious solution. Ask for professional advice
Mm.
is number one. Also, the benefit that you have in asking those search professionals is that because it's their job, they're used to interfacing with their clients and probing and asking questions to really understand what it is that you're looking for.
Okay.
Uh, and oftentimes the expectations are not realistic. Like if you want someone who's both a a uh, a sniper, an orchestra conductor, and
Mm.
a three-star chef, you're gonna have to choose, right? There's a point in
Right.
time where
Right.
right, you need to prioritize, and and um and and those professional research firms, they're good at helping you, I would say, form a more realistic view of what good looks like. Um, and then, of course, they're also good at understanding the interpersonal dynamics. And
Mm,
when they work with you as the founder or they work with the board, they understand the behavioral fabric of the organization, and therefore they're looking for candidates that have the kind of profile in terms of behavioral skills that would actually fit reasonably well
right.
with the company.
Okay, okay. So if today you have one lesson, one key takeaway, one deep thought that you want to share with the audience, that you want them to live with or keep thinking about today, what would that be?
Um, don't wait for too long to start being an entrepreneur if you feel like doing it. It certainly is a fantastic experience. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I waited maybe too long. But time when it's gone, it's gone. It's the worst possible resource. You can't store it, you can't accrue it. It doesn't
Yeah,
generate
yeah, yeah,
interest. It's the worst resource. But so I guess it's a matter of yeah, appetite. Um, if you feel like doing it, don't do it blindly like the crusade of the children. But once you have an idea and it is reasonably well crafted and you had some decent input as to whether it is feasible or not, go for it. Don't wait. Um, um, Also because you will be able to leverage the inner flame, this personal drive
mm,
that you find in all entrepreneurs. One of the reasons why I love working with startup founders, those that I mentor, for instance, in a startup incubator, is they have this willingness to do something, to
yeah,
grab the bull by the horn and to wrestle it to the ground, and that's very refreshing. So if you have this, if someone has this inside himself or herself, go for it.
excellent. Thank you for that. So guys, you heard it. Stop thinking, do it. So Pierre, if people want to keep talking with you or have more conversation with you, or maybe benefit from your services, from your mentoring, coaching, whatever, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay. That's the
And,
that's
and,
the
and
easiest
I'm
way.
happy. I don't know if this is part of your solution. I'm happy to leave my directions behind.
Okay. So Pierre, I want to thank you very much for your time. You are super busy, so it was a real pleasure to have you.
Thank
And I
you,
hope
Thomas.
we get you back soon on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.